I'm Camille. And at my sister's wedding, my father raised a glass and told everyone I was never really theirs. They laughed. I didn't. Because it wasn't a joke. It was the truth they buried for 20 years. That night, I stood up, took the mic, and exposed everything the adoption. They hid the records I found in a box marked Christmas lights, the photos where I was always cropped out. They called it drama. Then they sent lawyers to make it official to cut me out of the family for good. But I didn't stay quiet. I turned my story into a gallery, and every person who's ever been the empty chair in their own family showed up. If that's ever been you, stay. This story is yours too. I arrived at the Glen Ridge Country Club with my dress sticking slightly to the back of my thighs from the humid Portland air. The gravel parking lot was already half full with luxury sedans and rented SUVs. Somewhere inside, laughter was echoing off chandeliers, and champagne was flowing like water. It was Mira's big day. My little sister. The golden child. I walked past the valet stand nodding at the young man who reached for my keys a second too late. I had parked myself in the far corner like I always did. Out of the way. Unnoticed. Inside the grand hall, everything gleamed, white roses cascading from tall glass vases, candlelight dancing along ivory tablecloths, soft jazz humming beneath the clatter of heels and silverware. It smelled of money and perfection and someone else's dream. I scanned the reception area for my name. There were place cards lined up in perfect rows on a marble table near the entrance, each one hand-lettered in soft gold ink. I leaned in, scanning carefully. My eyes flicked from Adams Michelle to Blackwell Henry. I looked 3 times. Then I looked again. There was no Prescott Camille. A hostess in a tight black blazer approached, her smile trained but not unfriendly. "Looking for your place card?" she asked, already glancing down at her clipboard. "Camille Prescott," I said quietly. She ran a finger down the list, paused, frowned, then double-checked. I don't see that name." "Are you with the bride's family?" I nodded once. "Sister." She blinked. "Oh. Would you mind just waiting a moment? I'll check with someone. It wasn't worth it." It never was. I gave her a polite wave and stepped aside. My heels clicked lightly on the marble as I walked past laughing clusters of relatives and old friends. Everyone looked like they belonged in a magazine spread. I spotted Uncle Greg and Aunt Leslie clinking glasses with someone from Mira's yoga studio. I saw Lisa, our cousin, snapping photos of her kids in front of the floral arch. No one looked my way. At the edge of the room, just beyond the string quartet's setup, was a folding chair, plain utilitarian, tucked behind a speaker tower. It wasn't assigned to anyone. It wasn't meant for photos or conversation. But it was empty. I sat. For a few minutes I watched the party move on without me. A waiter passed by with crab puffs and didn't stop. A group of bridesmaids huddled near the bar, laughing at something on someone's phone. I could hear Mira's voice from the head table, bright and clear, calling someone babe and laughing in that lilting way that always sounded like she was on stage. There was no chair with my name on it. Not just today. Not ever, really. Growing up, I had assumed my role in the family was like the invisible scaffolding behind a set. I held things up, filled in the gaps. Drove Dad to appointments. Picked up Lisa's kids when she was late. Smoothed over Mom's temper when she snapped at Mira. I'd told myself it mattered. But sitting there invisible in a room full of people who shared my last name, I realized something. Maybe it never had. Or maybe it only mattered when I stayed quiet. A couple brushed past me. The woman's perfume lingered, a sharp citrusy trail that made my stomach turn. I stood up for a second, not sure why, then sat again. I adjusted my dress. Smoothed my hair. Tried not to think about how this was exactly the kind of moment I'd always hoped would feel like a warm welcome. Instead, it felt like trespassing. Someone snapped their fingers behind me. The sound made me flinch. "Oh, sorry, didn't see you there," a young guy said, brushing past to adjust the speaker cords. Of course he didn't. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. No messages. No missed calls. Just a silent screen and the faint reflection of my own face, half shadowed in the lock screen glare. I looked older than I remembered. Maybe it was the lighting. Maybe it was everything else. Then I saw Mira. She was across the room, radiant in her white gown, gesturing toward a group of older guests near the fireplace. Her smile was effortless. Her eyes scanned the room, sparkling with joy. For a brief moment, I thought she saw me. But she didn't. She turned to Ren, her groom, and pressed a kiss to his cheek. They looked perfect together. She looked perfect. She always had. I sat back in the chair, letting my shoulders drop slightly. The music shifted to something soft and string-heavy. I imagined someone from the family planning every second of this. The seating chart, the playlist, the candlelight. And somewhere along the way, someone made a decision. Maybe it wasn't cruel. Maybe it wasn't even conscious, but it was clear. I wasn't part of the picture. I was just the blur at the edge of the frame. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel it. The ache. The shame. The strange hollow mix of both. No one noticed. No one looked. I was there. And also somehow I wasn't. So I sat. And I waited. I didn't have to wait long. The MC tapped his glass with a fork and the room quieted in soft waves. The lights dimmed slightly and the DJ faded the music down. All eyes turned toward the center of the hall where my father, Harlan Prescott, stepped up to the microphone with his usual mix of charm and authority. He looked sharp in his navy suit, boutonniere pinned just right, tie perfectly straight, always polished, always in control. He cleared his throat and smiled the way he always did when he was about to make a joke that only he would truly enjoy. "I want to say a few words about my beautiful daughter Mira," he began. He glanced at her across the room, beaming. She waved delicately, already misty-eyed. "And of course her new husband, Ren. Welcome to the family, son." Scattered applause. Camera phones rose. My stomach tightened. I had heard this speech before, or versions of it. He always performed well. He told stories that landed. He paused in all the right places. People laughed even before the punchline. And then he went there. "You know it's funny," he said, chuckling into the mic, "the way families grow. How fate drops someone right on your doorstep. Literally. I mean, we picked one of ours up from someone's porch, just sitting there like a package that got delivered to the wrong house." Laughter. Loud, unfiltered, collective. I didn't laugh. I stared at him as the corners of his mouth curled into something almost proud, like he had just shared a cherished family memory. He went on something about how lucky they were to have such a wild mix of personalities, how Mira was the fire and Ren the calm, how Lisa brought the party, and how I apparently kept the book straight. More laughter. I stood up. Not because I planned to, not because I had rehearsed anything. My legs just moved. I walked across the glossy floor, heels clicking like gunshots, weaving through round tables and trailing stairs. Some people whispered. Some didn't notice. Most kept smiling. When I reached the stage, I stepped up onto the platform beside him. My father looked over, puzzled. He leaned toward the mic to make a comment, maybe a recovery line, but I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. He hesitated, then stepped back. I turned to the crowd, every nerve in my body lit like wires sparking under pressure. "That wasn't a joke," I said. The laughter stopped. "That story about the porch, that wasn't a cute family anecdote. That was the truth. And I wasn't dropped off. I wasn't a package. I was hidden." The silence was absolute. Even the waiters froze in place. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the folded paper I had carried for years. My fingers shook, but I unfolded it carefully and held it up. "This," I said, "is my adoption record. I found it in a box labeled Christmas lights. My name, my birth date, signed by my parents, the ones who raised me. The ones who decided at some point that I was better kept quiet than known." A few gasps. A few muttered whispers. I pressed forward. Some of you probably wondered why I never gave a toast. Why I wasn't listed in the program. Why I wasn't sitting with the family. It's because I wasn't really part of it, not the way they told the story. Not the way they wanted you to see it. I turned and nodded toward the AV tech station near the back wall. He looked startled but clicked a button. The projection screen behind me lit up. Photo after photo appeared, old family pictures. Me standing off to the side, cropped halfway out. Eyes closed. No arms around me. One image after another, and in each I was present but peripheral. I was there but never centered. In the final photo, I stood between Harlan and Dolores holding a middle school science fair ribbon. Both of them looked at the camera, but their hands hung at their sides. They weren't touching me. The caption read, "Spring 1996. I let the images linger. Behind me, I heard a chair scrape back. Mira stood abruptly, face pale, her hands clenched at her sides. She didn't say anything. She just walked straight out of the room, the train of her gown dragging behind like a shadow she couldn't shake. I turned back to the crowd. For years I kept quiet because I thought silence kept the peace. I thought being useful was the same as being wanted. But all silence ever did was make me disappear. I handed the microphone to the MC. He didn't take it right away. His eyes were wide. Then slowly he reached out and grasped it. I stepped down. No one stopped me. No one called after me. I walked out of the ballroom into the cool hallway past portraits of past club presidents and plaques from golf tournaments no one remembered. The carpet muffled my footsteps. The only sound was the faint echo of champagne flutes clinking somewhere behind me. I kept walking. By the time I reached my car, the parking lot was nearly empty. A few stragglers stood beneath the awning finishing drinks and pretending not to be shaken. I didn't glance back. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove without turning on the radio. The silence inside the cabin pressed against my ears like altitude. The city lights blurred through the windshield as I merged onto I-84 heading nowhere in particular. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't even grip the wheel tighter. I just stared straight ahead while my body moved on autopilot like it had done for years. 20 minutes later, I pulled into a gas station outside Troutdale. It was one of those half-lit stops with a buzzing fluorescent sign and vending machines that hadn't been stocked since last winter. I parked by pump 4, turned off the engine, and sat with my hands on my lap. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. No new messages. No missed calls. I unlocked the screen and scrolled to the folder I never talked about. It wasn't labeled anything dramatic, just MISC. But inside were screenshots and images I had collected over years, like quiet confessions no one asked for. First, a photo of the family group chat, or what used to be the family group chat. My name was no longer in the participant list. No goodbye. No explanation. Just gone. Next, a picture of the wedding invitation Mira had posted to her Instagram story 2 months ago. I had never received one. I had told myself it must have gotten lost, that someone had forgotten to hit send. But looking at the RSVP tracker she shared with friends, there was no entry under Camille Prescott. Not even a placeholder. Then the image that stung the most. A photo I had taken myself years ago in the garage of our old house in Northeast Portland. The day I found the adoption records. I had been digging through boxes marked Xmas decor looking for the green and gold light strands Mira loved. I opened the wrong bin. Found the envelope instead, plain manila. No name, just brittle tape across the top. Inside, a birth certificate that didn't match the one Mom had given me for school. Court records. A signature from a judge I didn't recognize. My name. My birthday. And a new line I had never seen before. Adoptive parents Harlan and Dolores Prescott. I had stared at that line for a full minute, maybe more, while my breath fogged the frigid garage air. My gloves itched at my wrists, my fingers numb. I remembered hearing Mira's voice from the kitchen asking if the hot cocoa was ready, and I closed the box. I didn't say a word. That was the first silence I swallowed. Tonight it felt like I had swallowed 1,000 more. I sat in the car at the gas station staring at those photos until my vision blurred. I wasn't sad. I wasn't surprised. But the numbness was worse somehow. At least, pain was proof you still had nerves. This was just hollowness, a space where something used to live. I opened my email app and typed in a name I hadn't used in over a decade. Malcolm Foster. He had been a friend of my grandfather's, a private attorney who used to visit during the holidays when I was little. He always brought peppermint bark and called me kiddo like I was someone who mattered. When my grandfather passed, Malcolm stopped coming. I figured they had been closer than anyone else realized. I had no idea if the email I found online still worked. I didn't know if he would remember me. But I wrote anyway. Subject: personal inquiry. Hi, Mr. Foster. I don't know if you remember me. Camille Prescott. Harlan and Dolores's daughter. I believe you were involved with some of my grandfather's legal affairs years ago. I came across something I think you might have handled or at least known about. It's regarding my adoption. I'm not looking for a confrontation. I'm just trying to understand. I need to know if anyone ever saw me. Really saw me. If you have a moment to talk or email back, I'd be grateful. Thank you for your time. Camille. I stared at the message before hitting send. My finger hovered over the screen like it had weight. Then I tapped it. Message sent. I leaned back against the headrest and let the air from the cracked window brush across my skin. The parking lot buzzed with a faint hum of insects and a dog barked somewhere in the distance. The stars were faint above the gas station lights, barely visible behind the haze. But they were there. And so was I. Still breathing, still here. I turned off the phone screen and set it on the passenger seat. Then I closed my eyes and let the truth settle in. It didn't want to stay buried anymore. By morning, the story was everywhere. I woke up to a buzzing phone, its screen lighting the dark of my cheap motel room like a flare. At first, I thought maybe it was spam or a missed call from Malcolm, but then I saw the notifications. Dozens of them. Texts. Mentions. Tags. A name I hadn't used in years, suddenly attached to a clip with over 10,000 views. Someone had recorded the moment. Not the whole speech, not the context. Just the part where I took the microphone and said, "That wasn't a joke." The caption read, "Woman interrupts father's toast at wedding, reveals she was adopted on stage." It had been posted to a Portland community Facebook group. The kind of place where people usually asked for plumber recommendations or argued about road construction. But not today. Today they were arguing about me. The comments were split like a clean tear down the center of an old page. Some called me selfish, dramatic, attention hungry. Others said I was brave, raw, a symbol of the silenced. They debated everything from adoption ethics to whether weddings were the right place for confrontation. I scrolled through the threads slowly, my thumb hovering between rage and disbelief. One woman wrote, if she was really hurt, she should have talked to her family privately, not hijacked her sister's big day. Another replied, maybe her sister never listened. Maybe that was the only time anyone would. Some of them tried to guess who I was. A few got it right. A distant cousin chimed in under her real name, trying to defend the family. Said I had always been difficult, that they had done their best with me. She didn't mention my name, just she. I set the phone down face up on the pillow beside me and stared at the ceiling. A water stain shaped vaguely like Florida spread above me, yellow at the edges. I traced it with my eyes while the echo of that word rolled through me. She, that had always been the space I filled. Not Camille. Not daughter. Not sister. Just her. A text buzzed in around 8 a.m. I didn't recognize the number at first. Then I saw the signature. Ethan Rowe. We hadn't spoken since college, maybe once in passing after a photography exhibit downtown years ago. I remembered him as the boy who sat 2 rows behind me in art theory, always sketching in the margins of his notes. His message was short. Saw the video. You stood straight. You're still you. I stared at it for a long time. Then typed back. First time I haven't had to bend to be loved. A moment later the typing dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then reappeared. Then he wrote, if you need to get out of town, I've got an extra room in Grey Ridge. Quiet, but the coffee's decent. I smiled before I could stop myself. Not a big smile. Just the kind that presses at the edge of something you forgot was still soft. I didn't say yes. Not yet. Instead, I turned the phone to airplane mode and climbed out of bed. The floor was cold beneath my feet. I shuffled toward the window and pulled back the curtain. The morning light over the gas station was gray and indifferent. A woman filled her tank in a bright red coat. Her kid bounced in the backseat, tapping at a tablet. Life moved on. It always did. But I hadn't expected mine to shift so publicly. Later that afternoon, a woman messaged me directly. Her profile picture was a watercolor sunset. No name I recognized. She wrote I was adopted too. No one ever talks about how lonely it feels to be the secret. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to fit a lifetime of nodding quietly into a few lines of text. Another message came an hour later. This one from a stranger who said her mother erased her from the family group chat after she came out. The words she used hit like echoes. I thought I was crazy, but watching you say it out loud made me feel sane again. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone heavy in my hand. I had only wanted to speak for myself, not to become someone else's symbol. But now there were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, attaching their pain to mine like threads on a needle. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel bad either, it just felt true. And for the first time in a long while, truth felt lighter than silence. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket and stepped outside. The wind was sharp against my neck. A seagull called overhead too far from the coast for comfort. I walked to the edge of the lot, stood beneath the buzzing station sign, and breathed. I didn't know where I was going next, but I was done letting other people decide where I belonged. I packed my car before sunrise. There wasn't much to take. A duffel bag with 2 pairs of jeans, a few shirts, toiletries, and the camera I hadn't used in years. I left the hotel key on the dresser and didn't leave a note. No one would come looking. The road out of Portland was still wet from the night rain, and fog clung low along the highway. I drove with the windows cracked, letting the damp air fill the car, keeping me awake. Every mile put distance between me and that banquet hall, between me and the voices that only remembered me when they needed a ride, a babysitter, a buffer. Grey Ridge was about 2 hours southwest. A coastal town with just enough charm to feel like a postcard, but not enough polish to attract tourists year-round. I had looked it up once during a late-night spiral in college after one of Mira's early birthday parties where my name wasn't on the cake. I remembered bookmarking an article titled, 10 Towns That Feel Like Healing. Grey Ridge was number 7. When I arrived, the town was still wrapped in fog. Fishing boats bobbed in the harbor. The bakery hadn't opened yet, but someone had already lined up crates of bread outside the back door. Everything felt hushed, like the town respected the silence I carried with me. Ethan met me on the front steps of a 2-story bar that smelled faintly of old whiskey and lemon cleaner. He looked the same, but older, like time had settled into him gently. A little scruff on his jaw, the same quiet eyes. He didn't ask questions, just opened the front door and sat upstairs. The room was above the bar, tucked beneath the slant of the roof. The floorboards creaked, and the radiator groaned every few minutes like it was arguing with itself. There was one window facing the sea and a twin bed with a faded quilt. It smelled of salt wood and something old but familiar. "You can stay as long as you want," Ethan said, leaning against the doorway. "It's not much, but it's quiet." "It's perfect," I said. He nodded like he believed me. We walked down the block to a small cafe on the corner, the kind with mismatched mugs and handwritten signs taped to the counter. A woman named Arrow ran it. She was wiry, blunt, and watched me like she could see through my skin. "You work clean?" she asked, squinting at me over her glasses. "I think so." She looked at Ethan. He shrugged. "Fine. Mornings start at 6. Aprons in the back. Don't touch the espresso machine without asking." That was the whole interview. By the end of the week, I knew how to open the shop, slice the muffins, and refill the sugar jars before the sun hit the east window. Regulars came in at the same time each morning. A man named Walt who only drank hot water. 2 women who never smiled but left generous tips. No one knew my last name. No one asked. Each morning after my shift, I walked to the pier with a cup of lukewarm coffee and sat on the edge watching the tide roll in. The water was cold and endless. The air smelled of fish and something metallic, but it never bothered me. I started taking pictures again. Not of people. Just spaces. Empty chairs, fog over rooftops, rusted nails in old docks. Things that were present but overlooked. I didn't post them anywhere. I just kept them on a memory card, stored like secrets I didn't need to hide. One night after work, Ethan brought over 2 beers and sat with me on the narrow balcony outside my room. We didn't say much. He handed me one of the bottles, the cap already twisted off. You look different, he said. Older, number lighter. I let the words sit between us. I think I was always carrying too much, I said. But no one ever noticed because I never dropped it. He looked out toward the sea. What made you drop it? I didn't. They took it from me. I paused. And I realized I didn't need to pick it back up. He nodded slowly, like he understood that more than he could say. We sat there until the breeze picked up and the bottle in my hand grew slick with condensation. I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. I just let it stretch between us, soft and steady. Later that night, lying in bed beneath the hum of the radiator, I stared out the window. The moon hung low, casting a silver path over the ocean. The town below me breathed in sleep. My hands rested on my stomach, empty but calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a call or an apology or a place at the table. I had found something better. A place that didn't ask for a backstory. Just a clean apron and steady hands. The email came on a Tuesday morning while I was wiping down the pastry case at the cafe. It was from Malcolm Foster. The subject line simply read, Camille. I stepped into the narrow hallway by the back storage room, where the sound of clinking dishes and milk steamers faded. My thumb hovered over the screen as I opened the message. Dear Camille. Of course I remember you. I remember a quiet little girl who always watched the grown-ups too closely and asked questions that made us stop talking. I remember one Christmas when you sat beside your grandfather, silent but entirely alert, and asked me why he always saved you a seat at the table even when there were more guests than chairs. He told me later. Because if I don't, no one will. I've thought about that moment many times since. I want to share something with you, and I hope it won't come as another wound. Your grandmother Eleanor Prescott came to me shortly after your 18th birthday. She asked me to help her establish a private trust in your name. Nothing large at the time, but she insisted it grow quietly, steadily. She said if one day they push her away, she'll need to know someone once planned for her to stand on her own. The account now holds approximately $193,000. It was never meant as a secret, but I believe your grandmother worried about what would happen if your parents knew. She made me promise to keep it between us until you asked the right question. I'm glad you finally did. If you'd like to discuss next steps, I can drive to Grey Ridge later this week. Warm regards, Malcolm Foster. I read it twice, then a third time. I slid my back down the wall until I was sitting on the cool tile floor, knees pulled up to my chest, phone resting on my thigh. It wasn't the money that stunned me. It wasn't even the secrecy. It was the quiet, deliberate care behind it. The idea that someone years ago saw the shape of the fracture long before it cracked open and tried to leave me something soft to land on. I remembered Grandma Eleanor's voice, thin but firm. Her long fingers always wrapped around a teacup, her eyes never missing anything. You don't have to earn your place, she told me once while we sat on the back porch. Real love doesn't come with conditions. Back then, I thought she meant marriage. Now I knew better. I responded to Malcolm's email later that night, sitting at the edge of my twin bed with the window cracked open to the sea breeze. Thank you, I wrote. For remembering. For this. I'd like to meet. He arrived 2 days later, driving a silver sedan that looked like it had been meticulously cleaned that morning. He wore a navy sweater over a collared shirt and brought with him a small leather folder. We sat at a corner table in the cafe after the lunch rush had died down. Arrow passed by once, raised an eyebrow at him, then disappeared into the back. Malcolm looked older than I remembered, but not fragile. His hands were steady, his voice clear. She loved you, he said, simply setting the folder in front of me. She worried you'd be erased. I opened the folder and saw account summaries, signatures, dates that matched my school years, even notations in Grandma's handwriting. Little things, grocery amounts, bookstore purchases. A note from when I was 19 marked, for camera repairs if she ever starts taking pictures again. I hadn't told anyone I'd stopped photography that year. But somehow she knew. Why didn't she tell me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She tried, Malcolm said. In small ways. But she was outnumbered. And she didn't want to risk making it worse for you while you still lived under their roof. I stared at the signature at the bottom of the last document. Eleanor M. Prescott. Strong, deliberate, unshaken. I closed the folder and laid both hands over it as if to anchor myself. Malcolm reached into his coat and pulled out a small white envelope. She wrote you a letter too. Said I wasn't to give it unless you ever found your way to the truth on your own. He slid it across the table. I didn't open it then. I just held it, thumb brushing along the edge like I was tracing her voice. Thank you, I said. He stood, nodded once, and didn't say goodbye. Just walked out into the coastal light like he'd simply delivered something long overdue. That night I sat by the window and opened the envelope. It was one page. Handwritten. Slanted cursive I hadn't seen since my high school birthday cards. My Camille. If you're reading this, then I didn't protect you the way I should have. I'm sorry. I tried in the only ways I could. I want you to know you were never invisible to me. You were always the reason I stayed at that table. I saw the way they overlooked you, used you, held you just far enough away to make you question your place. That was never your fault. You belong to yourself. That's more than enough. Love, Grandma. I folded the letter carefully and placed it between the pages of my notebook. Outside, the sea moved like breath, slow and constant. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. But I felt held. By someone who was gone, yes. But still holding on in all the right ways. I started carrying my camera everywhere. At first, I didn't even know why. It had been years since I held it with intention. Back then, photography was something I did to prove I could make something beautiful. Now it felt different. Less about beauty. More about presence. I took photos of things no one noticed. A single chair pushed away from a table. A swing set missing one chain. A diner napkin holder with only one napkin left. Window reflections where no face looked back. Small absences. Quiet erasures. I called the series Framed Out. Ethan saw the shots one night while we were cleaning up at the cafe. I had my camera out scrolling through the images absent-mindedly when he leaned over and said, "These are something else. Something else good. Something else necessary," he said. I laughed, but he didn't. "You should show them," he said. "To who?" He shrugged. "The people who know what it feels like. I bet there's more than you think." 2 weeks later, the local library offered me a corner wall for a weekend exhibit. No opening night, no press release. Just space. Clean, quiet space. I printed 10 of my favorite shots. Mounted them on foam board. Simple titles. No captions. Number 1. A child's bedroom with one side of the bunk bed untouched, perfectly made. Number 2. A family photo taped to a fridge with one figure's face accidentally scratched out, left unreplaced. Number 3. A dinner table set for 6 but only 5 plates. Number 4. A church pew with one hymnal missing. I wasn't trying to scream. I just wanted to show what silence looked like when it was made visible. The first morning of the exhibit, I arrived early and stood off to the side near the exit. People trickled in slowly. Couples. A teenager with headphones. A mother holding her son's hand. Most walked quietly, eyes lingering longer than I expected. Some nodded. Others stared like they'd been caught remembering something. One man stood in front of the photo titled "Just 5 Plates" for almost 10 minutes. His hands stayed in his coat pockets, his mouth pressed shut. He didn't cry. But his shoulders fell just slightly, like he was finally letting go of a weight he hadn't named. A woman approached me around midday. Late 60s, silver hair pulled into a tight knot, cardigan buttoned to the top. She didn't smile. Just stopped in front of the image with a scratched-out face and said softly, "I know your mother." I blinked. She looked at me, then at the photo again. "I always thought something wasn't right," she said. "I should have said something back then. I really should have." Then she turned and walked away before I could ask her name. I watched her disappear between the stacks of large print books. The room felt heavier for a moment. Not in a bad way, just full. Like the air had thickened with everything that had never been said. Later, a young woman approached with her daughter. She pointed at the photo of the swing set with the broken chain. "That one," she whispered to the child. "That's how it felt when we left." Remember? The little girl nodded solemnly. By the end of the weekend, over 100 people had walked through the small exhibit. Some left notes in the guest book. Short lines like, "I saw myself here and I didn't know how much I needed this," and "Thank you for not staying quiet." I didn't write anything back. I didn't need to. What mattered was that people saw it. Really saw it. Not just the photos. The absence inside them. Ethan met me at the end of the last day, helping me take the photos down carefully and slide them into a large portfolio sleeve. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. Then paused. "Someone new," I said. "A woman. She knew my mother. Said she always felt something was off." "Did she give a name number?" "Just guilt." He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. We finished packing in silence. That night, I walked to the shoreline. The tide was low, revealing patches of wet sand that shimmered under the moonlight. I stood still for a long time, letting the wind press against my back, camera strap slung across my shoulder. For so long I thought the problem was that no one remembered. Now I knew the truth was worse. They remembered, they just never said anything. But I had. And that was enough to change everything. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, slid quietly under my door like a secret no one wanted to say out loud. It was thick off-white with my name typed in bold across the center. No return address, but I knew. I didn't have to open it to feel the weight pressing against my chest. I waited until the sun dipped low enough to shadow my room, then peeled the flap open with slow, steady fingers. Inside were 7 pages. The first was a cover letter. Cold. Formal. From a law firm in Seattle I recognized from my parents' holiday cards. "Thank you for your time. This notice is intended to avoid any potential familial dispute. Enclosed you will find a voluntary declaration to forfeit any claim to current or future inheritance properties or familial trusts under the Prescott estate." No greeting, no signature from anyone I knew. Not a single line from Dolores. Nothing from Harlan. No mention of what I'd lived, what I'd given, what I'd held in silence all these years. Just paper. Just distance wrapped in legalese. I set the pages down on my desk and stared at them. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just picked up my camera. I took one photo. The letter lying flat against the wood grain of my desk. No edits, no filters. Just the truth, black and white. Then I uploaded it to my photojournal account. Caption: "If I was never part of the family, why are they so afraid I'll come for my seat?" I didn't expect anything. But the post exploded. Within an hour, the comment section filled with strangers. People sharing their own stories of being erased. A man wrote about being written out of his mother's obituary. A woman said her name had been removed from her grandparents' gravestone plaque. One user simply typed, "I was adopted too. I found out in a court summons." You are not alone. They didn't know me. But they knew the shape of what I was carrying. I scrolled through the comments with trembling hands, each line like a hand on my shoulder. It was the kind of community I'd never had before. Not neighbors. Not cousins. Not friends who only called during holidays. These were people who had been left off guest lists, forgotten in group texts pushed to the edge of every photo. And we weren't quiet anymore. By the end of the week, the post had over 30,000 shares. A writer from a regional magazine reached out for an interview. A university student emailed me asking to use the photo in her senior thesis about generational estrangement. Someone even asked if they could get it printed as a poster. I didn't do it for attention, but the attention proved something I hadn't dared believe. I wasn't the problem. I was just the proof. Ethan found me sitting at the cafe counter the next morning, staring blankly at a cinnamon roll I hadn't touched. "They sent me the papers," I said without looking up. He pulled out the stool next to me. "What kind?" "Disowning kind." His jaw tensed. "You gonna sign them?" I shook my head. "I don't need their money. I don't even want their name. But I'm not gonna help them erase me twice." He was quiet for a long moment, then reached for my coffee and took a sip like it was his. "They always thought you'd stay quiet," he said. "That you'd carry it all because it was easier than dropping it." "They were right," I said. Until I didn't. I left the documents on the counter of my room next to the notebook with Grandma Eleanor's letter tucked inside. I didn't touch them again. That night, I opened a new folder on my computer. I named it Inheritance. Inside, I dropped the photo of the letter. Then the one from the wedding the chair left empty next to the family table. Then the screenshot of the group chat where my name had vanished. It wasn't revenge, it was record-keeping. If they wanted to pretend I had never been there, I would leave behind proof that I had. And I wasn't alone anymore. That was the part they hadn't expected. They thought cutting me off would silence me. But the truth is it gave me a louder mic than they ever allowed, and this time I wasn't handing it back. A few days after the gallery closed, I came home from the cafe to find an envelope wedged between the door and the floorboards. It wasn't like the others, thicker, weightier. The kind of weight that doesn't come from paper but from the silence that surrounds it. It had no return address. My name was printed in small block letters across a crisp white label. No handwriting, no postage. Someone had delivered it by hand. I brought it inside, sat on the edge of the bed, and held it for a long moment before opening it. My heart didn't race. Not exactly. It just thudded low and slow, like it was warning me that what I was about to read wouldn't surprise me. A few days later, I was cleaning the counter at the cafe when my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first, thinking it was another reaction to the inheritance post. But when I checked it during my break, I saw a message from a friend I hadn't heard from in months. Thought you should see this. Attached was a screenshot, Mira's Instagram story. A family dinner. The table was long white linen stretched tight across it, plates already half-emptied, glasses catching the soft glow of candlelight. Everyone was there, my father, Delora, Lisa, even cousins I hadn't seen since I was 16. And at the far end of the table, one chair was empty. Not pulled back like someone had left, just never filled. The caption read, "So good to be together again." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because of the familiarity of it. The angle of the photo. The way they framed it so the chair was almost out of shot. Almost. But not quite. I didn't reply to my friend. I didn't message Mira. I didn't ask why. Because I already knew. They wanted the image of a whole family, one with enough room for laughter and candlelight and curated captions. But not enough room for truth. Not for me. The story was gone within minutes. Someone must have commented. Maybe more than one person. "Where's Camille?" I didn't see the replies, but I saw the aftermath. The story was deleted. The next post was a neutral landscape of the Oregon coast with no tags and no location. A silent cleanup. But someone had already saved the photo. Screenshots started appearing in my inbox. On my feed. In tags from strangers who followed me after the exhibit. "This looks like your chair." They're not even subtle. "That chair is louder than a scream." I printed the photo. Blew it up to 8 by 10. The empty seat in clear focus. The blur of a hand mid-laugh next to it. A wine glass barely touched. On the back I wrote in black ink block letters I was never missing. "You just never invited me." I didn't mail it. I didn't even seal it in an envelope. I pinned it to the corkboard in my studio space just above the caption card from my framed-out exhibit. Visitors started stopping to look. Some paused longer than others. One man ran his finger along the edge of the photo like he could touch the silence there. A young girl, maybe 19, stood in front of it for almost 15 minutes, her arms crossed tightly, eyes glistening. She didn't say anything. But she came back the next day. Left a note under the photo that read, "They said I was dramatic. But I was just left out. I left it there." One afternoon, a woman in her 50s asked me quietly if she could photograph the board. She said her daughter hadn't spoken to her in 3 years, and sometimes she wondered if she was the one who had created the empty chair. I said nothing. Sometimes silence tells more truth than words ever could. That night I pulled the folder from under my bed and flipped through the photos I hadn't shared publicly. One of the swing set missing one chain. The RSVP card I never received. A mirror cracked down the middle reflecting nothing but sky. I added the new photo to the set. Titled it Deliberate Absence. Because that's what it was. Not a scheduling conflict, not an oversight, not miscommunication. A choice. An empty chair set with silverware and a name never mentioned. I didn't post it to my page. Not yet. Some wounds don't need to bleed publicly. They just need to breathe in still air. Ethan noticed the new addition the next morning when he passed the board. "That's new," he said, pointing at the print. I nodded. They posted it. Then deleted it. He looked closer, jaw tightening. Let me guess. No apology, no explanation. Not even a message. He was quiet for a moment, then turned to face me. "Does it hurt more because they're still pretending you were never there?" I opened my mouth to answer but stopped. Because that was exactly it. If they had said, "We don't want you here," at least that would have been honest. But they wanted the image of family without the cost of including me. And that was a different kind of cruelty. A cold, clean version. One that let them move on without guilt while I sat with all the noise they refused to hear. That evening, I walked to the shore with my camera and watched the waves pull against the sand. A gull perched on a wooden piling nearby, its feathers ruffled by the wind but unmoving. I took a photo of it. Just one. The title came easily this time. Left Out Still Standing. Back home I uploaded it to my drive but didn't share it yet. Some images weren't for the world. Some were just proof. That I was still here, that I still saw, that I remembered, and that I was done asking them to do the same. But it would still sting. Inside was a single document. No cover letter. No personal note. No softening words. It was from Prescott and Lowell, the family law firm. The header was crisp and professional. The language underneath colder than I remembered from the last time I'd seen one of their envelopes back when they sent a condolence letter after Grandma Eleanor passed, typed like a receipt. The document was titled Voluntary Relinquishment of Beneficiary Rights. My name was typed beneath it. Camille Eleanor Prescott. I read the next line aloud just to hear it echo in the room. This notice confirms the recipient's irrevocable decision to relinquish all current and future claims to family inheritance, including but not limited to property assets and intellectual holdings, with intent to eliminate future familial conflict. Beneath that was a single dotted line for my signature. That was it. No greeting, no contact name, no explanation. Just legal language with teeth dressed in formality. I stared at it. Not because I didn't understand, but because I understood too well. It wasn't just a document, it was an erasure attempt. A paper knife designed to sever me from anything they could still control. They wanted my silence made official. They wanted to write me out completely, not just socially or emotionally, but legally. I laid the document flat on the little wooden desk by the window. The same desk where I'd written birthday cards to Mira as a teenager, folded homework balance checkbooks when Dad said he was too tired to look at bills. I smoothed the corners and took a photo. No styling. No filters, just the letter as it was. Then I uploaded it to my page. The caption read, "If I was never part of the family, why are they still afraid I'll come back for my seat?" It didn't take long. Within an hour, the image had been reposted more than 1,000 times. By the end of the night, it had gone viral in spaces I didn't even know existed. Adoption forums, family estrangement support groups, women's legal rights pages, comments poured in like water through a cracked dam. I got one too. My uncle made me sign it when I was 20 and had nowhere to go. They said it was standard. It wasn't. I didn't even get a letter. Just stopped getting invited. Some people sent long stories. Others sent nothing but a red chair emoji. One woman posted a photo of herself at a graduation ceremony, her cap on her seat the last row. Her family had come for her cousin. I sat curled in the chair by the window, blanket around my legs, reading until my eyes burned. I didn't respond. I didn't repost. I didn't add commentary. I just read. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had lost something. I felt like I had named it. Around 9, Ethan knocked and came in carrying 2 mugs of tea. One for him, one for me. He set them down, glanced at the envelope still sitting on the desk, then looked at me. "That it?" he asked. "Yeah." He picked it up, scanned it quickly, then exhaled. "They really said it without saying it, huh?" I nodded. "What are you going to do?" Nothing. Nothing. They want me to sign. I won't. But I'm not going to chase them down for what they think I owe or deserve. That's what they never understood. I never wanted their things. I just wanted to matter. He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. You do. I looked out the window toward the sea. The tide was in swallowing the sand slowly. A fishing boat bobbed near the dock, its mast barely visible in the fog. They're rewriting the story, I said. But I still have the pen. He smiled, soft and sad. Then write louder. I picked up the envelope and slid it into my portfolio between the photograph of the dinner table with the missing chair and the RSVP card I'd found in a thrift store that no one ever sent. I didn't sign anything. I didn't tear it up either. Let them wonder. Later that night, I took out my camera and walked through town. I photographed a mailbox with no flag, a porch light left on long after midnight, a closed door with 3 sets of muddy footprints in front but none going in. I titled the series Not Forgotten. Because we weren't. We had just been told to be quiet, but I wasn't quiet anymore. The afternoon sun filtered through the salt-stained windows as I pulled the old box from under my bed. It had been there since I moved to Grayridge, tucked behind a stack of photo books and folded flannel. I had told myself I wasn't ready to open it. That I didn't need to. That letting go didn't mean revisiting everything they left behind. But something about that last image, the empty chair on Mira's feed, had stirred something deeper than anger. It had reached into the part of me that still wanted to be remembered. Not forgiven, not even loved. Just remembered. The box creaked when I lifted the lid. Inside were the fragments of my place in their world. The adoption papers yellowed slightly at the edges. A copy of the letter Eleanor wrote me the year I turned 18, folded neatly into a blue envelope with my name written in her looping cursive. A handful of photographs, school concerts, birthdays, family holidays. In every photo I stood just to the side. Never quite centered. Sometimes cropped, sometimes blurry. In one, I was standing on the edge of a stage, the light missing my face entirely while Mira stood in full glow holding a bouquet. Another showed a family barbecue where I was carrying 2 trays of food in the background while everyone else laughed near the grill. I flipped them over one by one. I expected tears, but none came. Instead, I felt a calm resolve settle over me. These were not heirlooms, they were records. And I had enough of those. I gathered the papers carefully and brought them downstairs out the back door to the small rusted fire pit behind the building. The wind had died down, and the sky was the color of steel wool. I tucked the papers in gently one at a time. Eleanor's letter went last. I held it in my hand longer than the rest. She had seen me, truly seen me. And that had to be enough. I struck the match. The flame caught slow at first, curling the edges of the documents like they were exhaling. I didn't look away. I watched the ink fade and the corners blacken. Watched memory become smoke. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't rejection. It was release. I stayed there until the fire burned out, until the last ember dimmed, until there was nothing but ash and wind. Back upstairs, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I almost didn't check it. I had no energy left for comments or questions. But the name on the screen wasn't a follower. It was Tasha, a college friend I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Just thought you should know, she wrote. Mira had the baby. A girl, healthy. Everyone's doing great, that was it. One sentence. A simple update. But no one from my family had messaged me. Not Lisa, not Dad. Not Delora. Not even Mira. I set the phone down, walked slowly to the sink, and turned on the tap like I needed to anchor myself in something ordinary. The water ran cold and clear. They hadn't forgotten. They had chosen silence. I was not just out of the photo. I was out of the frame entirely. Out of the story. Not a call. Not a text. Not a "we thought you'd want to know." I didn't cry. But something inside me shifted. Like a clean slice through the place where hope used to live. I dried my hands and walked to the wall where the new series hung. The corkboard now held 12 images. Each one silent. Each one holding more truth than years of forced smiles ever had. I added one more. It was a photo I had taken weeks ago but never used. A hospital bassinet in the window of a thrift shop, dusty and forgotten, a single knitted blanket still folded inside. I pinned it beneath the title, "What They Didn't Say." And on the card beneath I wrote in pen, "A child was born, and I was not told. But I was still here, still alive, still someone." Later that night Ethan stopped by. He didn't bring tea this time. Just stood in the doorway, eyes on the fire pit below. "You okay?" "They didn't tell me she gave birth." His shoulders tensed. "They don't get to define what family means anymore, Camille." I nodded slowly. "But they're still trying to erase the proof that I was ever part of it." He stepped inside and looked at the board. His eyes landed on the photo of the bassinet. "That one's going to stay with people." "I hope so." We stood there in silence. Outside the wind had picked up again. Not sharp, just steady. Like something was finally moving forward. Like maybe I didn't need their stories anymore to know mine was real. The wind was colder that morning, sharp at the edges but not unkind. I wrapped a scarf around my neck and walked down to the beach, camera slung over one shoulder, pockets heavy with nothing in particular. Just weight. Just memory. The tide was retreating, drawing pale foam back into the open sea. The sand was damp and scattered with seaweed and broken shells. The kind of mess no one bothered to clean because it was natural, honest. I liked that. I had carried the chair down the back stairs earlier, the old wooden one I'd found in the alley beside the thrift shop. It was chipped and uneven, the white paint peeling in wide strips. It looked like it had belonged to someone once, then didn't. Fitting. I set it down near the edge of the waterline, just out of reach of the waves. It faced away from the town. Away from the homes. Toward the open horizon. I stepped back and lifted my camera. The light wasn't perfect. The clouds were shifting too fast and the reflection in the wet sand kept disappearing. But the moment was there. The chair alone, upright, defiant in its solitude. The kind of stillness that said, "I do not need to belong in your house to exist in the world." I took the photo. One shot, then another from slightly lower. Then one more just in case. I named it before I even left the shore. No invitation needed. Back in my room, I printed the final image. I watched as the photo came to life, inch by inch, the grain of the wood chair, the shimmer of the ocean behind it, the faint track of my own footprints leading up to where I had stood. I didn't frame it. I folded it into a heavy brown envelope. No note, no return address. Just the picture. I wrote the family's street address by hand. Not in anger, not in hope, just precision. Then I walked 3 blocks to the post office and dropped it in the outbound box. I did not wait for a receipt. I did not check the tracking. Let them open it or don't. Let them understand or miss the message completely. It didn't matter. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a declaration. It was a reminder. I had existed. And I didn't ask for permission. That afternoon, I returned to the cafe and worked my usual shift. Dishes. Orders. Smiles. A regular named Patty brought in lemon bars and insisted I take 3. I thanked her and meant it. Between customers, I watched the sky turn pink over the harbor. The sun dipped behind the boats, casting long shadows over the sidewalk. My hands ached from scrubbing, but in a way that felt earned. After work, I sat on the floor in my room, cross-legged, surrounded by old negatives and unused prints. I flipped through them slowly. Some made me wince. A blurred shot of a birthday cake where my name had been spelled wrong. A photo from high school, me off to the side while Mira held the award. A family portrait where I had been cropped out for the holiday card. I didn't tear them. I didn't burn them. I placed them in a new box. Labeled it in pen. What was. Then I took the envelope from the lawyers, the one asking me to sign myself away, and slid it into the bottom of a drawer. I didn't need to make a grand gesture. Ignoring it was answer enough. Later, Ethan stopped by with a stack of new film rolls and 2 chocolate croissants. He set them down on the counter and looked at me. "Did you send it?" "Yes." He nodded. "You look lighter." "I feel it." He poured us coffee and leaned against the wall. "Do you ever think about going back just to see what they'd say?" Not anymore. You sure? I stared at the window, watched a bird land on the rooftop across the alley. I'm not angry. I'm just not waiting. He smiled soft around the eyes. That's peace, Camille. We didn't talk much after that. The silence between us felt full, not empty. Before bed, I pulled out the notebook I kept in the drawer by the lamp. I flipped to a blank page. I wrote one line. I was not lost. I just walked away. Then I closed the book, turned out the light, and let the night hold me without asking anything in return. The morning of the new exhibit arrived with a mist that hugged the sidewalks and softened every sound. I walked the 6 blocks to the community gallery with my portfolio pressed to my chest like it was something living. The doors were already propped open when I arrived, the smell of fresh paint and clean wood greeting me like a breath I didn't know I had been holding. Inside, the space was quiet. Light streamed in through the tall windows and pooled on the floor. My section was in the back, tucked against a brick wall that still bore the faint marks of what used to be an old deli counter. Somehow it felt right. Not polished, not perfect, just real. The series was called Framed Out. This time I didn't just hang the photographs. I pinned pieces beside them. The RSVP card with no name. A copy of the family tree missing one branch. A handwritten note from a girl who had stood in front of my first photo and said, "You made me feel less invisible." Each image stood alone, but together they told a fuller truth. A dining room table with 5 full-place settings and one with just a napkin. A swing moving with no one on it. A birthday cake with the name Camille written on a tiny tag off to the side of the main inscription. I watched as people trickled in slowly. Strangers. Locals. A few familiar faces from the cafe. Some came alone. Others in pairs. One man arrived holding the hand of a teenage boy who wore headphones and a stiff denim jacket and didn't say a word. They spent 15 minutes in front of the photo titled Uninvited, then quietly moved on. I stood near the corner, not hiding, but not seeking attention either. An older woman with silver curls studied the image of the empty chair on the beach. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something, then closed again. She turned to me and simply nodded. I nodded back. It was enough. The gallery filled slowly, gently. No music. No announcements. Just people's stories and silence. About halfway through the afternoon, I saw her. She couldn't have been more than 23. Maybe 24. Pale sweatshirt, tired eyes, the kind that had cried earlier and now were pretending they hadn't. She hovered by the wall for a long time before finally stepping forward. She stopped in front of a photograph I had added last minute. A blurry family snapshot with a red circle drawn in marker around the one face turned away from the camera. The caption said nothing. After a few minutes, she turned to me. "Are you the artist?" I nodded. She took a deep breath and said, "My sister got married last spring. Our parents sent out the invitations. Mine never came. I texted to ask, and she said it must have gotten lost. But later I found out she told everyone I had refused to come. I wasn't even on the seating chart." I felt the weight of her voice as if it came from a place I still remembered too well. She bit her lip and glanced back at the photo. I thought I was over it. But then I saw this, and I just wanted to say thank you. I looked at her, really looked. She was trembling, not in fear, but in release. "You don't have to thank me," I said softly. "You already survived it. That's the hardest part." She smiled, eyes wet. "Your work made me feel like I didn't need to apologize just for being here." I reached out and rested my hand on her shoulder, a quiet anchor. We stood there like that for a moment, the noise of the room muffled around us. Not every story needs to be loud. Some truths speak just by existing. She nodded and slipped away, disappearing into the soft rhythm of footsteps and low conversation. Later, as the exhibit wound down, I stood by the chair photo again. The one I had mailed home. I never found out if they opened it. I never asked. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the people who stopped to see it. A man whispered, "This was my brother's wedding." A mother said, "My son cut me off 5 years ago. I still set a place." A teenager murmured, "I didn't think anyone else noticed when no one saves you a seat." They noticed now. That night, I walked home alone. The mist had returned. My coat smelled faintly of varnish and old paper. My feet were tired, but my chest felt light. Back in my room, I placed one final print on the wall above my bed. It was the beach chair. The one facing the ocean. Empty, resolute, at peace. I wrote one sentence beneath it. I was never missing. You just didn't look. Then I stepped back, took it in, and smiled. Not because everything had been fixed, not because I had been welcomed back, but because I had finally walked forward without asking to be followed. And that was everything. If you've ever been the empty chair in your own family, I hope you know this space was made for you. I hope you share your story. Because here your voice will never be erased.